Alrighty, in this video we are going to put together two more tasks. In fact, those are the two more configurations that we're going to need in order to have TeamCity being able to automatically deploy any component of our system. So the last two remaining things are the client and the launcher. They both are going to be pretty straightforward. There's only a couple considerations that we have to think about when putting them together. The first thing is, remember how when we perform our build, we inject in a release number into our buildinfo.cs file, and that causes the buildinfo to reflect what version this was built on. So to keep things really straightforward, I'm not going to use semantic versioning or any other versioning scheme other than something really simple, which will be a number followed by a timestamp, and the numbers won't necessarily be sequential. Or no, they will be, but there could be gaps. Like I'm not trying to create a very rigorous versioning scheme here. That's something that you would want to discuss with your team and implement accordingly. But instead, what I'm going to show is a very simple, straightforward way to handle this sort of environment where you do want every new build to result in a new version number. Well, fortunately, there is a number in TeamCity already available to us that we can use. For example, notice how as I expand these individual configurations, we see the build history, and you see that that's prefaced with a number. And that number looks suspiciously like the amount of builds that we have performed on that configuration, which indeed is the case. This means that all we have to do is take that number, dump it into our version variable, and then our build script will go in and dump that into the buildinfo.cs, which means our launcher and our clients will both be tagged with the appropriate version numbers. So that's pretty much what we're going to do. That's going to be the biggest thing that we're going to do. Other than that, all we have to do is make sure that we have Unity installed for our client so that he can be built as well. So in addition to the version number, you'll notice that if we look at our launcher, for example, we need our environment. We already have our environment. We need our domain. We do not have a domain yet set up as a variable. We need our deploy token, which we haven't set up, our timestamp, and our version number. So really, we need our version number, deploy token, and domain. We need these variables all fixed up. And once we do that, our deploy launcher task should work without problems. So let's go ahead and look at our domain. Looks like we actually already do have our domain done to an extent, but here I have an incorrect domain set, mmo.3dbuzz.com. Although off video, I will be setting all of this stuff up on our production boxes, which will be the exact same system that what we have here, by the way. The only difference will be things like this domain variable. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this domain variable to say mmo.3dbuzz.sta, which if you recall is the local host file entry that I put on my development computer to point to the virtual machine that's currently hosting both TeamCity and the website itself. So that domain will be used to upload the launcher and the client to. Okay, so we have the domain figured out. Now we need to figure out our deploy token, and we need to figure out our version number. And once we have both of those things figured out, we're done, with our launcher at least. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our version number first. So what that's going to be, a simple matter of creating a new parameter inside of our TeamCity project, and then setting its value to a variable that's actually built into TeamCity itself. And that variable, it reflects this number that we see right here, which looks like exactly what we want to version our software with. So let's go ahead and come up here to administration. I'm assuming you're logged in as an admin. And then you're going to want to locate your project and just click on the root project. Don't click on any of these individual configurations. We're going to be creating two new configurations. However, I want this value that we're about to put in, this parameter, to be available to every single build configuration in this project. So let's go ahead and click on 3dbuzz MMO. And then over here on the left-hand side, we have the parameters tab, which is where we put all our parameters. And you see so far we have pretty much all of the parameters we need for our build configuration to work, all isolated in one screen. I really like that. But let's come up here to add new parameter. And I'm going to want to add a parameter that's going to be picked up by this variable, this version number variable. So it's going to be an environment variable, and it's going to be called a version number. So let's jump back into TeamCity, and on the name, I'm going to type in env.version_number. I'm going to make sure not to hit tab because that would reset the kind of the variable and everything would just break. Then I'm going to come down here into the value, but what's cool is if we click this little button right here, nothing happens. There we go. If we click this little button here, you'll see we have a bunch of these variables that we can actually stuff into this value, and that's really cool. And you can even see our user-defined parameters as well, so we can mix and match and concatenate multiple parameters together and all that fun stuff. You see we have things like env operating system, env path, we have TeamCity URLs as well, or variables as well, MS build, PowerShell, all that fun stuff. Well, the one that we want is going to be, first of all, prefaced with a division symbol, or a modulus symbol, and, or sorry, a percent sign. Or modulus symbol. And then we are going to type in build. Sorry, my lack of using the correct word confused myself. We're going to say build.number, and that build.number variable is going to be picked up and filled in so that we can have that information for us. Basically injected into our build process. But anyway, so that's what we have to do there to get our version number done. So now we've done that, let's go ahead and hit save. Now what's cool about this, you might be saying, well, why don't I just use build.number or any sort of equivalent environment variable that might be set inside of the build script itself. I'm not even sure if that's possible, but even if it was, I still prefer doing the wiring between TeamCity to my build script manually, because there could be a variety of instances where I may want to change the format of these parameters. But if I made my build script depend on a particular environment, that environment currently being TeamCity, then that makes that build script a lot less flexible, and it also makes it impossible for us to make global changes within our configuration without changing the source code of the build script itself. Okay, so that's our version number in there. What else do we have? We need our deploy token. So let's go ahead and create a deploy token for us. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to type in mmo.3dbuzz.sta. I'm going to wait an hour and a half for it. Oh, wow, that was fast. I'm going to log in as an admin, so you guys should be familiar with this process already. We're just going to go into the admin area. We're going to locate our deploy tokens. And then I'm going to create a token, and I'm going to create it for 127001. The reason is because the deployment is actually going to be happening from the build server, not from my local computer. In fact, these two IP addresses right here are no longer relevant because these both point to my host computer. So I'm simply going to remove both of these tokens and only leave one for 127001. So that means no matter what, this, even if you gain access to my deploy token for whatever reason, you won't be able to use it to authenticate it against my API because it'll only accept connections from the local machine and not from remote machines. Of course, if you have access to the local machine, the security is already compromised to the point where it doesn't really matter. All right, let's jump back into TeamCity, and I'm going to add a new parameter, and I'm going to say env.deploy token. I'm going to paste the value in there. And I'm going to hit save. Okay, so now we have our deploy token, our environment, our Photon deploy folder, our version number, our web deploy computer password, and user. And these are really the only variables that we need, except for potentially our Unity path, in order to build our stuff. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and add in our build configuration for our client, or sorry, for our launcher. I'm going to come up here to administration. I'm going to click on 3dbuzz MMO, and I'm going to come out here to create build configuration underneath build configurations. And I'm going to call this one deploy launcher. I'm going to hit create. I'm going to attach an existing VCS root, and I'm going to select MMO Bitbucket and say attach. Then I'm going to wait for it to scan for MS build files. It found 2 of them. I'm going to tell it to use this one right here, which will pre-create a nice little build step right here for me. But it's not quite done yet. So I'm going to click on it and open it up. By the way, if you're curious as to how to create your own build steps, I mean, you can create them manually very easily. You just select your build tool. You see everything here from MS Build to Rake to Gradle to Ant, all that fun stuff. In the case of MS Build, you're going to have to specify a location to an MS Build project, the versions, the targets, and all that fun stuff. Okay, so as far as the MS Build version, we're going to use Microsoft.NET Framework 4.5. Tools version 4.0, Run Platform x86 is fine. But we will be changing the target, and that's because the thing that we want to execute is actually deploy launcher. So let's just type in deploy launcher. I wonder if you get autocomplete in this. Oh no, those are just variables. Okay, so now that we have this all set up, let's go ahead and save it out. Let's go ahead and see what happens when we hit run. So over here on my deploy launcher, I'm going to hit run, and I'm going to see what happens. I'm sure I made a mistake somewhere. Again, with this stuff, it's very, very, very easy to miss one thing, forget another thing, and so on and so on. That's why coming in here and doing testing as often as possible is important, so that you catch mistakes early. So in this case, it looks like we're moving right along here. Looks like we're back in the deploy launcher task. It's going to sit there. Should be uploading right about now, I'm guessing. Of course, it's hard to tell with the disk I/O of my VM being what it is. It's still chugging along. Okay, let's go ahead and open up its log and see exactly what it's doing. We see that it is zipping. It did zip successfully. Then we had an error. The error that we had is error uploading file not found. Where did we get this error? A lot of weird things, but I don't really care. Blah blah blah. So it did zip. It failed on uploading file. It says uploading file not found. Okay, it said file not found. Let's go ahead and see. I wonder if that could be from the upload itself, or if it could be. Okay, it says file not found, system HTTP stream content. I think that's from the file being specified wasn't found. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the upload file task, and I'm going to take a look at exactly where it tries to set the file, set the file name to. So it says new stream content file open file. Okay, file is entirely provided by the thing that calls this task, which is our build script. So let's scroll down to our upload file and see what we set file to. We set it to /build launcher zip. You'll also notice that here we set it to the same thing. So in theory, those files should be found. So now what I want to do is I want to come back into my virtual machine, and I actually want to track down the build agent and see exactly if that zip was created, and if it was created in a folder that was being referenced by my upload task. So I'm going to open up Explorer, and so you might want to ask, you might be asking, okay, so I know that it's doing this somewhere on my hard drive. I know that somewhere on my hard drive, this code is being checked out from Bitbucket, MS Build is being executed against it, and it's performing a bunch of operations such as creating zip files, uploading stuff, and so on. But where do I go looking for it? Well, if you recall, the actual processes that you define are executed on your build agent, which you can have as many of those as you want. They could be spread across an entire network or even over the internet. And that's where the checkouts happen, which means that we're going to want to open up our build agent data path. And our build agent data path is going to be in one of two places. I don't exactly remember where, because the data path that I use in production for 3D Buzz is in a non-standard location. So let's just go ahead and go hunting. I'm going to jump into TeamCity, and I know it's going to be somewhere in the build agent somewhere. So I'm going to open up build agent, but I see that up in the build agent, it really just looks like the build agent code itself. It doesn't look like it's that contains the data at all. So it's not there. Let's go ahead and go into our program files and see what we can see here. I don't see anything interesting. Let's open up our other program files folder. Don't see anything interesting there either. So it could potentially be in program data. So I'm going to open up program data. So that's C program data. I believe program data is going to be a hidden folder by default. So we can get into it like that. And we can see JetBrains, which is the creator of TeamCity. We'll go into TeamCity, and those are our build artifacts. We don't have any build artifacts. So that's really not where it is either. Huh. Or, you know, I could just look right there. Wow. See TeamCity build agent work. Seems like a reasonable place to put it. So we're going to go to C, TeamCity, build agent, and we're going to open up the work folder. And here's our repository. So this should look familiar, because this is our repository. Look in the source folder, we see all of our project files. Our Unity folder, we have our client and our editor, Unity projects, and so on. The folder I'm interested in is called build, launcher, and then launcher.zip. Because it seems to me that launcher.zip exists and contains the appropriate files. So that file not found error has to be coming from something else, unless I misspelled something. But if I misspelled something, this task wouldn't have worked on my development machine. So we know that somewhere along the line we are getting a file not found. Another potential reason that we may get that is because after I changed the domain, I didn't actually commit my change. Isn't troubleshooting lots and lots and lots of fun? Well, I mean, you know, troubleshooting is really like the majority of programming. If anybody thinks the majority of programming is writing code, then they're sadly mistaken. What happened was I forgot to change the domain from mmo.3dbuzz.com to mmo3dbuzz.sta, and this file not found error, or this isn't a not found error, uploading file not found. This is actually an HTTP 404 error code that's being sent back to us because that file doesn't exist. Okay, so we updated our buzz MMO proj unit, or MMO build.proj. We're going to stage it. Then I'm going to hit commit. I'm going to say fixed build script parameters. You know, there is an argument to be made, while this pushes, there is an argument to be made that I shouldn't even have the domain in the build script. I should really have the domain be a parameter in the TeamCity itself. The reason why I put it in here was because I didn't want to repeat that every time I invoked those locally from my local command prompt. But it might actually be a better idea to remove the domain variable entirely from our build script and use it only in TeamCity. But for now, since I just updated the code base, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that my deploy launcher works. So I'm going to jump into projects. I'm going to hit run. And you should see my change, as you see right here. So if I click on this little pending, we do see that TeamCity has been made aware of my recent push, so therefore it should be building against the most recent code. And the most recent code includes the proper domain. Okay, so we're executing the deploy launcher step. We should be zipping here pretty soon. And of course, after the zip, we're going to do a launch, or sorry, not a launch, a upload. And we get success. So, according to this, our launcher was deployed. Let's go ahead and see if that was true. If we come back to the home page, we see download launcher version 2. Let's go ahead and come back here to launcher and hit run again. This only takes about, 34 seconds. Actually, I'm going to pause the video while it does this. It looks like it's taking a little bit longer. Alright, so it seems now we should have a version 3. Coming back over to our MMO, refreshing, we now see that version 3 of the launcher has indeed been uploaded. So that completes our launcher, and that only completes our launcher, because now we have to move on to the client. So how are we going to build the client? If we come back here into Visual Studio and look at the client task, or the client target, we can see deploy client is somewhere around this file. Deploy client is right here, and you see that we execute Unity in batch mode. And then we zip up all the artifacts, and we push them over into our server. So this is going to mean that we're going to need to install Unity. It's also going to mean that Unity path is going to have to be set to something. But I think I made the right call with the way that I put Unity path together. As you see at the top of the file, it'll default to C program files x86 Unity, but you're free to overwrite it. So it's going to be very common on a server, if you were to install Unity on a server, to install it to a different location. Maybe if you're running a server on SSD, you might want to install it to an HDD or vice versa. So it's important to be able to override the Unity path. But since that's the default location for Unity on a 64-bit operating system, and we're all running 64-bit operating systems, then this should be a pretty sane default. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the build server, into my virtual machine here, and I'm going to hop over to Unity, and I'm going to download it. So I'm going to come here, type in Unity 3D, download free now, download 451. And while this downloads, I'll go ahead and pause the video. Alrighty, so Unity is downloaded. Let's go ahead and get it installed. Maybe. If Windows feels up to it. Stuff and things. I'm going to pause the video. Alrighty, Unity is installed. Note that I did not install the monodevelop, I did not install the example project, and I did not install the web player. All of those things are irrelevant. In fact, we aren't really ever going to be launching Unity directly from within the build server. We're just going to use it as an automated process that will invoke from our corresponding build configuration, which will be invoking our build task. Okay, so I'm going to uncheck Run Unity 4.5 because I don't need to run it. And then I'm going to hop back into TeamCity. I'm going to go over here to Administration, jump into the 3D Buzz MMO project, hit Create Build Configuration. And for the name, I'm going to say Deploy Client. Hit Enter. I'm going to set the VCS root to MMO Bitbucket, and I'm going to attach it. It's going to scan it. It's going to come up here with this use this for buzzmmo build.proj. So let's go ahead and hit that. And then we have a build step. However, that build step needs to be changed. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to make a couple changes. So I'm going to select MS Build version. I'm going to select .NET Framework 4.5. And then for the targets, I'm going to check out my build script and remind myself exactly what target we made for that. And that indeed was deploy client. Jump back into TeamCity, type in deploy client in our targets, and hit save. Alrighty. Should be about it. Now if we go to projects, we see deploy client lists, but it says has no builds to display. So let's go ahead and hit run, see what happens. I am going to go ahead and monitor the build log itself directly by just clicking on build log, and I'll sit in the tree view, I guess. The tree view seems to have gotten a little bit more responsive than the last times that I've been using, or since the last version of TeamCity that I've used. Currently, I'm using the version before this for 3D Buzz. Okay, so it looks like we got a solution getting built right there, and that looks good. Okay, MS build failed. Let's see what failed exactly. It's actually getting kind of difficult to see where the error was. Oh, here we go. It says, right here, it says error. The command blah 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 exited with code 1. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and debug this problem. The easiest way to debug a problem with an exec command is you'll see right here that the entire exec command was printed out without any variables. That's actually very handy because what I can do is I can just take this whole command, and this command is double quoted, so you don't want the double quotes on either end of the command, and I'm just going to copy it. Then I'm going to jump into my build server. I'm going to open up a command prompt. I'm going to paste the command right in there exactly as it appears in the actual build. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to see what errors appear. So again, this is probably the easiest way to debug exec commands, is just seeing what happens when we execute that command in isolation of everything else. Okay, so first of all, we'll notice that Unity is indeed not running at all. Let's go ahead and see if it ever ran. No, I'm not seeing anything. Okay, so the next step for debugging an issue like this, particularly with Unity, is instead of trying to execute it with under no graphics, quit batch mode, project path, and blah blah blah, we can actually open it up as inside of a user interface or a GUI, and then point it to this folder, this project, and see what errors appear. So I'm going to launch Unity. And we see that it's connecting to a license server because I forgot to say activate the free version of Unity. Yeah, whoops. It says please sign in. Sure, why not? There we go. And let's hit start using Unity. Okay, and let's allow access. Okay, the problem was that Unity simply wasn't going to work because it wasn't activated. So now let's hit up and execute this one more time, and we should see some more action here. Particularly, we should see Unity appearing right there, as it does. So we see that Unity is running. We see that it's consuming resources. Now, the interesting thing about when executing Unity in this mode is that it'll return control immediately back to the command prompt. However, in a build environment, it will block until it's done. So now we see that the Unity process is no longer running. In some cases, the Unity process might be running for a very long time, and what that's caused by is when you move Unity projects over to another computer with using hidden meta files for source control. You know how you can go in Unity, you can enable or disable source control, and if you enable it, it creates these meta files that go along with your assets. Well, every new computer that you open that up on has to re-import all of those assets in. So if you have a couple gigabytes worth of assets in your project and you try to execute a build on a build server, you expect to wait, a couple hours before that build is going to complete. Good news is, however, is that it will not have to do that the next time you trigger a build unless you cause a massive amount of change in assets. So it's not really a drawback because it exists on every computer. I mean, even if you got a new developer working at your shop and he checked out the repository to his computer, he's still going to be waiting a couple hours for his assets to import. Well, it's the same thing with the build server. But again, fortunately, builds will be very quick once all the bulk of the assets have been generated. So now that we see that Unity is no longer running in the task manager, before I execute this in TeamCity, I want to verify that the actual file was built. And we can see that we told it to build in this directory. So let's go ahead and open this directory up and see if under build work client, we do indeed have a Unity build. So the next step in the build process would be to zip this up, and the final step would to shoot it off to the website. So yeah, I think that is pretty much all we'll have to do in the build server. I'm going to jump over into TeamCity and I'm going to run another build. So I'm going to run deploy client again. So really, we have this one stop, this one place. We have we have 4 buttons that are important, and click any of those buttons, and we magically have new software deployed into either your staging QA or even your production environment. And this is really the goal that we're trying to get to. The final thing that we need to do, once I verify that the deploy client task is working, is we just need to write the launcher. And the launcher is going to need to be able to update itself as well as the client. And that's just going to be a matter of querying the website and then downloading a zip and unpacking it. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. Once that's done, whenever we want to deploy a new change to all of the people who might be using our game, we just hit one button and get that package. Now, in a real, like in a team environment, in maybe a large corporation or a very large team, like think World of Warcraft or EVE Online scale, they'll have more processes involved with pushing a change to production. You'll have to get through you'll have to create the package, the deploy package. You'll have to test it through a variety of integration and system testing, as well as potential a QA group who will get their hands on it and choose to bless it or not, and so on and so on. There'll be a lot of bureaucracy involved with it, but in reality, it really just boils down to one person hitting one button that performs the automated build. There might be a bunch of intermediate steps, you might have intermediate builds, you might have checklists and all that fun stuff, but at the end of the day, this is the process that results in continuous integration. And as you see, we have a successful client build. Now, really, the only way to verify this successful client build is to open up our database and see if a client was uploaded to our website. So I'm going to go back into the virtual machine, and I'm going to open up MySQL Workbench. And I'm going to wait a year. Going to open up local instance, type in my password, which I believe is Nelson. I'll store that in the vault, so I don't have to type that again. Let's go into our uploads table, right-click, select rows, and we see we have a client.zip, type 1, latest version, or version 2, and we see that it was uploaded on today. Well, this is today, actually. This is today in UTC, which is, again, whenever you store a date in a database, be sure that you store it in UTC. But yeah, that's TeamCity. that's our building, our deployment, and our continuous integration. So we've covered, really, in the last set of videos, we've covered 3 major topics. We've covered how to automate builds using MS Build, how to automate deployments using MS Deploy, and then how to bring those together into a continuous integration environment by using TeamCity. And of course, we've only scratched the surface of the functionality of TeamCity, but that's something that you guys can look into yourselves over at JetBrains. For the purposes of what we're doing here, we don't need a whole lot of features. We just need to be able to have a web interface where we can fire off builds, have those builds be performed on a particular computer, and also have accountability so that I can, for example, see changes that may have led up to a build error or a build running slowly or something like that. So this is a very nice tool for those purposes, and it's what we're going to be using. And you'll notice we haven't even come close to hitting our 20 configuration limit. So I think that pretty much wraps up this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.